Checkmate. The word didn't just echo. It thundered through the Millionaire's grand hall, cutting through the laughter like a knife. Crystal glasses trembled as the guests froze, their smiles fading into stunned expressions. Victoria Langford, one of the richest and most influential women in the city, blinked rapidly, unable to comprehend what had just happened. Her carefully planned evening, a luxurious charity chess event designed to showcase her wealth and philanthropic nature, had just been hijacked by a twist she never saw coming. The source of her humiliation sat calmly across the board. Jamal, the 12-year-old son of her maid. Victoria had invited him as part of a joke. She thought it would be amusing to let the maid's boy face her renowned personal chess coach, a man who had competed on the international stage. The plan was simple. Let the boy lose quickly, let the guests laugh, and maybe get a few photos for her social media. But the laugh was on her. The room had been buzzing with chatter moments ago. Now, it was so quiet that you could hear the ticking of the antique grandfather clock in the corner. Businessmen, socialites, influencers, every single one of them was staring at the chessboard as if witnessing history unfold. Jamal didn't move or gloat. He just sat there, his posture perfect, his eyes as sharp as the pieces he had so precisely maneuvered. His fingers rested lightly on the table, and though his heart was pounding inside his chest, on the outside, he was the picture of calm confidence. Across from him, the Millionaire's personal chess coach sat slumped, his face red with embarrassment. His hands trembled slightly as he reached for his water glass. He had underestimated his opponent from the very first move, treating the match as a casual warm-up. Big mistake. Jamal's opening was aggressive yet calculated, his middle game full of traps that the coach walked straight into, and by the endgame, there was no escape. It had taken less than 10 minutes. 10 minutes to topple a man with years of professional experience. 10 minutes to shatter Victoria Langford's carefully curated image of superiority. Guests whispered among themselves. Did that kid really just beat him? No way. That coach charges thousands of dollars for lessons. Who is he? Victoria tried to mask her growing panic with a tight smile. Her pride, her perfect, polished pride, was crumbling. She couldn't let the evening end like this. Another round, she said suddenly, her voice tight, trembling just enough to reveal her frustration. That was just luck. He needs to prove it wasn't a fluke. Some of the guests chuckled nervously, unsure if they should agree or stay silent. The coach looked as though he wanted to protest. His confidence was shaken, but Victoria's glare silenced him. Jamal simply nodded. Okay. His tone was soft, but it carried a weight that sent chills down her spine. This wasn't arrogance. This was confidence built on countless hours of practice and self-belief. Victoria leaned back in her chair, trying to compose herself. She glanced at the boy's mother, Denise, who stood at the edge of the room, clutching her cleaning cloth nervously. Her eyes were wide with fear that her son might embarrass himself, fear of what her employer might do if things went wrong. But deep down, a tiny spark of hope was flickering. Jamal reset the board with practiced precision. His small hands moved swiftly, placing each piece in its starting position. The guests gathered closer now, their curiosity piqued. Phones were raised discreetly, recording what might become the highlight of the night. Victoria leaned forward, her voice icy as she addressed the boy. You play well, for someone like you. The comment stung, but Jamal didn't flinch. Instead, he met her gaze with a calm intensity far beyond his years. It's not about who you are, he said quietly. It's about how you play. For a brief moment, the room seemed to hold its breath. As the pieces clicked back into place, Jamal's mind was already strategizing 3, 4, 5 moves ahead. Every game was a battle, and he had trained himself to see the board like a battlefield where every piece had a purpose. He remembered long nights studying books he borrowed from the library, titles like My 60 Memorable Games by Bobby Fischer and The Art of Chess Strategy. He remembered watching free tutorials online, pausing and replaying every move until he understood why the grandmasters made them. Most importantly, he remembered his grandfather's words. Chess isn't about power, Jamal. It's about patience. Even the smallest pawn can become a queen. And tonight, in a room full of people who underestimated him, Jamal was ready to prove that truth. The coach adjusted his tie nervously, glancing at Victoria as if to say, "Are you sure about this?" But she just gave him a nod that demanded compliance. The boy reached out and made his first move. The guests leaned in. The match had begun again, and this time, everyone knew. They were watching something extraordinary. Victoria sipped her wine, her hand trembling ever so slightly. She had no idea that inviting this boy would be the worst mistake of her night. Because what was about to unfold wasn't just a game. It was the beginning of a legend. The day had started like any other. The sun streamed through the small cracks of the curtains in Denise's modest apartment. The room was tiny, barely enough space for 2 beds and a table, but it was clean and filled with love. Denise hummed softly as she got Jamal ready for school, handing him a packed lunch wrapped carefully in foil. "You have your homework?" she asked, tucking his collar neatly. "Yes, Mom," Jamal said with a smile. He was always cheerful in the mornings, even when life wasn't easy. Denise worked as a housekeeper in the sprawling mansion of Victoria Langford, a woman who flaunted her wealth like a crown. To Denise, every day in that house was a reminder of the world she didn't belong to, a world of chandeliers, marble floors, and people who looked down on her because of where she came from. But she endured it, because her son's future mattered more than her pride. Later that afternoon, as Denise scrubbed the grand staircase until it gleamed, she heard the clicking of heels. Victoria descended the stairs gracefully, her designer dress swishing with every step. She stopped midway and peered down at Denise with a smile that wasn't friendly. It was the kind of smile that said, "I own everything in this room, including you." "Denise," she said, her tone syrupy sweet. "Bring your son tomorrow." Denise froze, standing up quickly. "Ma'am, we're having a chess party. Some of my friends are coming over. We'll have some wine, some music, and I thought, why not invite your boy to play a little match?" Victoria's smile widened, but her eyes remained cold. It could be entertaining. Denise knew that tone. It wasn't an invitation, it was a setup. Victoria wasn't being generous. She wanted a spectacle. A poor housekeeper's son being humiliated in front of wealthy guests would be just another story for them to laugh about over champagne. "My son, he's just a kid," Denise said softly, trying to avoid confrontation. "Oh, I'm sure it'll be fun," Victoria replied with a dismissive wave. "Tell him to be ready by 7. Make sure he dresses presentably." Before Denise could say another word, Victoria walked away, heels clicking against the polished floor. From the doorway, Jamal had been listening. He had come to pick up his mother, his backpack still hanging on one shoulder. "I'll come," he said suddenly, stepping into the room with a determined look on his face. Denise turned sharply. "Jamal, no? You don't have to do this. She's just trying to. I want a mom. Trust me." His voice was calm but firm. There was no fear in his eyes, only a spark of confidence that Denise hadn't seen in a long time. She knelt beside him, placing her hands on his shoulders. "Sweetie, these people, they're not like us. They don't play fair. They'll try to make you look small." Jamal smiled. "They can try, but the board doesn't care who's rich or poor. It's just pieces, and I know how to move them better than anyone." Denise's heart swelled with both pride and worry. She had always known her son was special. While other kids spent their time glued to video games, Jamal had fallen in love with chess. It started when his late grandfather taught him the basics on an old wooden set. After his grandfather passed away, Jamal kept playing, studying library books, watching free tutorials on YouTube, and challenging anyone who would play against him. That night, while other kids slept, Jamal sat at the small kitchen table, his eyes locked on the board. The knight his grandfather had given him, a piece he always carried for luck, sat proudly in his hand as he practiced opening after opening, memorizing patterns and planning strategies. He whispered to himself as he moved the pieces. "If he goes here, I'll go there. If she attacks, I'll counter. No mistakes." Denise watched from the doorway, her heart aching. She wanted to stop him, to tell him not to risk being humiliated. But something about the way he studied the board with such focus stopped her. This wasn't just a game to him. It was his passion, his gift. Meanwhile, at the mansion, Victoria was bragging to her friends over the phone. "You won't believe it," she laughed. "I invited the maid's kid to play at the party. It'll be hilarious. Wait till you see his face when he loses in front of everyone." She didn't know that her entertainment was preparing to rewrite the script. By midnight, Jamal finally stood up from the table. He had gone through dozens of matches in his head, playing against imaginary opponents. He placed the pieces back neatly and tucked the knight into his pocket for luck. "Tomorrow," he whispered to himself, "they'll see." When morning came, He woke up with a strange calmness. While Denise nervously ironed his only good shirt, Jamal ate breakfast slowly, his mind already calculating moves. As they left the apartment, Denise held his hand tightly, whispering, "Please, just don't let them get to you." He looked up at her with a confident grin. "Don't worry, Mom. They're not ready for me." And as the sun set and they walked up the mansion steps later that evening, Jamal's heart didn't race with fear, it pulsed with anticipation. For the wealthy guests, it was going to be just another night of wine and laughter. For Victoria, it was going to be a chance to humiliate the maid's son. But for Jamal, it was the beginning of something bigger. Because this wasn't just a game. This was the night everything would change. The next evening, Victoria Langford's mansion came alive like a grand palace hosting royalty. The driveway was lined with expensive cars, valets rushing to open doors for the elite. Inside, chandeliers sparkled above crystal glasses as laughter and chatter filled the air. Guests sipped champagne, nibbling on hors d'oeuvres, while a string quartet played softly in the background. But amid the glamour, there was a curious buzz in the room. People whispered to each other, exchanging amused smiles. "Is it true? She invited the maid's son to play?" "Yes. Can you believe it? Poor kid doesn't know what's coming. I heard her coach is a monster at chess. This should be funny." Victoria stood near the grand staircase, basking in the attention, greeting guests as if she were hosting a royal ball. Her lips curved into a smug smile every time someone mentioned the match. This was her show, her entertainment. Then the doors opened. Jamal stepped in beside his mother. He wore his only good shirt, plain white, slightly wrinkled despite Denise's best ironing efforts, and black slacks that were a size too big. In his pocket, his fingers curled around a small, worn-out night piece. It was smooth from years of being held, a lucky charm that once belonged to his grandfather. The guests glanced at him and snickered quietly. Some raised eyebrows, others whispered behind their glasses. Victoria's smirk widened. Well, she said loudly enough for the crowd to hear. "The challenger has arrived." Denise's heart pounded in her chest, but Jamal? He walked straight to the chessboard set up in the center of the room, his chin high, eyes scanning the pieces as if the crowd didn't exist. Victoria's coach, a tall man with sharp features and an air of arrogance, rose from his seat and extended his hand mockingly. "Ready to lose, kid?" he said with a grin that showed too many teeth. Jamal shook his hand briefly, saying nothing. He simply sat down, adjusted his chair, and stared at the board with laser focus. "Everyone, gather around," Victoria announced with glee. Guests circled the table, phones at the ready, eager to capture what they thought would be a quick and embarrassing defeat. The coach smirked as he Saturday, "This will be quick, kid." Jamal's lips curled into the smallest smile. Without saying a word, he reached out and made his first move. The match began. At first, the coach played casually, not taking the boy seriously. He moved his pieces aggressively, expecting Jamal to fall into an early trap. But to his surprise, Jamal countered with precision, his moves fluid and confident. The crowd's laughter quieted. The coach frowned slightly, leaning forward. He tried to tighten his control, setting up attacks, but every time he advanced, Jamal responded with a counterattack that forced him to retreat. It was as if the boy could see 2 steps ahead of every move he made. Minutes passed, and the energy in the room shifted. The guests stopped whispering. Their eyes widened as they watched the boy not only hold his ground, but dominate the game. Jamal wasn't just playing. He was dismantling the coach's strategy piece by piece, forcing him into awkward positions. Victoria's smile started to falter. She took a sip of her wine, her grip on the glass tightening. By the 7th minute, the coach was sweating. He leaned over the board, his hand hovering uncertainly over his pieces. His opening confidence had vanished. Jamal sat still, calm as ever, his eyes scanning the board like a master surveying a battlefield. Every time he moved a piece, the sound of it clicking against the board sent chills through the room. The coach tried a desperate attack, sacrificing a piece to gain an advantage. Jamal saw it coming. He countered swiftly, trapping the man's queen. A collective gasp rose from the crowd. Phones were now recording openly, guests murmuring in disbelief. "How is this kid doing this?" one man whispered. "He's brilliant," another replied. By the 9th minute, the coach had nowhere to run. His king was cornered, surrounded by Jamal's perfectly placed pieces. The boy leaned slightly forward, his voice soft yet commanding as he whispered the word that sent shockwaves through the hall. Checkmate. The room erupted. Gasps, cheers, and applause filled the space as people couldn't believe what they had just witnessed. Some guests laughed, not at Jamal, but at the absurdity of the situation. The Maid's son had just humiliated a professional coach in under 10 minutes. Phones flashed as they captured Jamal sitting calmly, his hand resting on the board while the coach slumped back in his chair, pale and defeated. The man's pride had been shattered in front of dozens of witnesses. Denise covered her mouth, tears welling in her eyes. She had never been so proud. Even some of the guests who had mocked Jamal earlier now clapped enthusiastically. "That boy is incredible," one woman exclaimed. But while the room celebrated, Victoria's face darkened. She didn't clap. She didn't smile. Her jaw clenched as she forced herself to stand tall, her pride burning like fire. To her, this wasn't a victory, it was an insult. She stepped forward, her voice cold as she addressed the boy. "That was impressive," she said, though the word tasted bitter on her tongue. "But one win doesn't make you a genius. Perhaps you'd like to try again, this time against me?" The guests fell silent again. The tension rose. Jamal looked at her and nodded, his expression unreadable. "Okay," he said simply. The room buzzed with anticipation. The first match had shocked everyone, but what was about to happen next would leave them speechless. Victoria sat down across from him, her eyes burning with determination. She would not be humiliated in her own house. But what she didn't know was that the night was far from over, and the boy wasn't done proving himself. Victoria Langford refused to accept what had just happened. She stood slowly, her face frozen in a stiff smile that didn't reach her eyes. Inside, her pride screamed. The guests had witnessed her personal coach, a man she paid thousands to teach her, crumble under the hands of a 12-year-old boy. That humiliation burned her like fire. Her designer heels clicked sharply against the marble floor as she walked toward the chessboard. The crowd parted, murmuring in anticipation. The sound of champagne glasses being set down echoed faintly as the music in the background faded to silence. All eyes were on her. "Play me," she demanded, her tone sharp, almost venomous. The room fell silent. Not a single guest dared to laugh or whisper. They knew Victoria's temper. She was not a woman who liked losing, and she certainly wasn't about to let a boy humiliate her twice in one night. Jamal didn't flinch. He simply nodded and sat back down, his small frame unshaken by the tension swirling around him. He placed the knight from his pocket next to the board, a silent token of luck and a reminder of why he played. Victoria slid into the chair across from him, her movements deliberate, like a predator preparing to strike. "Let's see if that little trick of yours works on me," she said coldly. The pieces were reset. The guests leaned in, holding their breath as the match began. Victoria opened aggressively, pushing her pawns forward recklessly, throwing her knights and bishops into early attacks. Her moves were fast, almost frantic, designed to intimidate. Each time she slammed a piece onto the board, the guests winced at the sound. But Jamal? He stayed calm. His fingers moved lightly over the pieces, his eyes scanning the board with the precision of a master. Every time she tried to set a trap, he slipped out effortlessly, responding with counterattacks she never saw coming. Victoria's confidence began to falter. The room was dead silent except for the soft clicks of pieces being moved. You could hear her breathing growing heavier, see the sweat beginning to form at her hairline. She kept glancing at the board, frowning as if it had betrayed her. She had underestimated him, again. Halfway through the match, her position on the board started collapsing. Her queen was under threat, her pawns scattered, her king exposed. She bit her lip, frustration bubbling inside her chest. She had always believed that money could buy skill, respect, even fear. But sitting across from this boy, none of her wealth mattered. Jamal, on the other hand, looked completely at ease. He leaned back slightly, his eyes sharp and focused. To him, this wasn't just about winning. It was about showing that talent, passion, and intelligence had no boundaries. He almost looked like he was enjoying the challenge, even as Victoria grew more desperate with each move. Gasps escaped from the guests every time Jamal pulled off a move they didn't see coming. Some guests started smiling, others shaking their heads in disbelief. A few even whispered words of encouragement, rooting for the boy despite being in Victoria's home. "Impossible," Victoria muttered under her breath after losing yet another piece. Her hands trembled as she reached for her wine glass, taking a shaky sip before setting it back down with a loud clink. The game dragged on for a few more minutes, but deep down, she knew it was over. Jamal's strategy was flawless, his traps perfectly set. Every move she made only brought her closer to her downfall. Then, with the grace of a true champion, Jamal moved his queen into position. His voice was calm, firm, and powerful as he spoke the word that shattered the room's tension like glass. Checkmate. The word hung in the air for a moment, sinking into every corner of the grand hall. Then the room erupted. Guests clapped, some laughed in disbelief. Others simply shook their heads, amazed at what they had just witnessed. Phones recorded the moment, capturing the image of a boy who had just outplayed one of the city's most powerful women. Denise's hands flew to her mouth, tears streaming down her cheeks. Pride swelled in her chest as she watched her son stand tall, calm, and victorious. Victoria sat frozen, her face pale, her pride shattered. Her hands rested limply on the table as she stared at the board, unable to comprehend how a child had beaten her so easily. Some guests exchanged awkward glances, unsure whether to comfort her or continue applauding. Most chose to cheer for Jamal, their admiration for him far outweighing their loyalty to the hostess. One man near the back whispered, "That boy, he's a genius." Another guest nodded. She thought she was going to humiliate him. Turns out, he humiliated her. Victoria clenched her jaw, forcing herself to stay seated, but her trembling hands betrayed her anger. She had wanted to make Jamal small, but instead, she had made him legendary. As the applause died down, Jamal stood slowly, his night piece in his hand. He looked at Victoria with no arrogance, only calm respect. "Thank you for the game," he said quietly, before stepping back to his mother's side. The guests erupted again, some even cheering. Victoria remained still, humiliated in her own mansion. This wasn't just a game. This was a lesson she would never forget. And the night was far from over, because Jamal's genius was about to be recognized by more than just the people in that room. The room was still buzzing from the second match when an unexpected voice cut through the applause. "That," the man said, stepping forward from the crowd, "was absolutely incredible." Everyone turned to see who was speaking. He was tall, dressed in a simple gray suit, his presence calm, yet commanding. Unlike the other guests, he didn't wear an expression of shock. He wore one of admiration. Slowly, he made his way toward the table where Jamal stood, clutching his night piece. "I don't believe we've met," Victoria said coldly, trying to regain control of the evening. "And who might you be?" The man turned to her politely. "My name is Richard Collins. I'm an international chess scout. I work with young talents, training and preparing them for global competitions." His eyes shifted back to Jamal with a warm smile. "And I think I've just witnessed one of the brightest young minds I've ever seen." The crowd erupted into whispers. "A chess scout. Here, by chance. This kid's life is about to change." Collins knelt to Jamal's level, looking him straight in the eye. "Where did you learn to play like that?" he asked, his voice filled with genuine curiosity. Jamal shrugged modestly. "Books, videos, and my grandpa taught me the basics before he passed away." The scout smiled, visibly impressed. "No formal coach? No training camps?" "No, sir," Jamal said quietly. "Just a board and a lot of practice." Collins nodded, standing back up. "You have talent beyond your years, Jamal. Talent that can't be taught. It's instinct, it's brilliance. With proper training, you could compete in world tournaments and win." Gasps rippled through the room. Guests who had once laughed at the idea of the maid's son being a serious player now stared at him with awe. The murmurs quickly turned into applause, and then into cheers. Denise stood frozen at the edge of the crowd, tears filling her eyes. She covered her mouth with her hands, overwhelmed by emotion. For years, she had watched her son pour his heart into chess, never asking for anything but the chance to play. Now, in the most unexpected way, his gift was finally being recognized. "I'd like to sponsor you," Collins continued, pulling out his card. "That means training, tournaments, and opportunities to show the world what you can do. What do you say?" Jamal looked up at his mother. Denise wiped her tears and nodded, her voice trembling as she said, "Take it, baby. This is your chance." The boy turned back to the scout with a shy smile. "I'd like that, sir." The room erupted into applause once more, louder this time, filled with genuine excitement. Guests surrounded Jamal, offering congratulations, shaking his hand, and even taking pictures. Meanwhile, Victoria stood in the corner, her face pale, her pride shattered. She had started the evening expecting to humiliate a boy and his mother. Instead, she had become the laughingstock of her own party. The whispers she now heard weren't about Jamal, they were about her. She really thought she could embarrass him. Now she's the one embarrassed. Serves her right. Victoria forced a stiff smile, but her eyes betrayed her rage. She clutched her wine glass so tightly it almost shattered. There was no way to spin this. She had been defeated, not just at the chessboard, but in the court of public opinion. As the night drew to a close, Collins exchanged contact information with Denise, making plans to start Jamal's training immediately. Guests lined up to shake Jamal's hand, each one telling him how amazing he was. The boy handled the attention with quiet grace, never boasting, never bragging, just smiling politely and thanking everyone. Before leaving, Collins leaned down to Jamal one more time. "Remember this night," he said softly. "It's the first step towards something great. Don't ever let anyone tell you where you can or can't go. You're destined for big things." Jamal nodded. "Thank you, sir." As he and his mother walked out of the mansion, Denise looked up at the night sky, whispering a thank you to her late father. She knew he was watching, proud of the grandson who carried on his legacy through the game he loved. From that day forward, Jamal's life changed forever. With Colin's help, he began training with some of the best coaches in the world. His talent only grew sharper. Months later, he entered his first major tournament and won. The media picked up his story, calling him the boy who checkmated a millionaire. Videos of his victory at Victoria's mansion went viral, inspiring thousands of kids worldwide to believe in their potential. Year after year, Jamal climbed the ranks, defeating seasoned players, breaking records, and eventually earning the title of Grandmaster at an age younger than most in history. He traveled the world, yet he never forgot where he came from. Every time he won, he dedicated his victories to his mother and late grandfather, thanking them for believing in him when no one else did. And Victoria? Her humiliation never quite faded. Whenever Jamal's name appeared on the news, she was reminded of the night she tried to make a boy small and instead made him a legend. Because sometimes genius hides where you least expect it. It can come from the humblest of places, from the quietest of people, from those underestimated by the world. And when that genius is finally revealed, it's checkmate.